Hey, what's up? You're tuned into The Cutting Room, the show where we talk to industry-leading marketing professionals about their content marketing philosophy, process, and pregame before they edit an article live. I'm your host, Tommy Walker, and thank you so much for joining us live today. My guest today is Eddie Shleyner, the founder of Very Good Copy. Previously to that, he was the lead copywriter at G2, and he's been a consultant for Gong, Ramp, Drift, Help Scout, Whereby, and he's written for Forbes, Hootsuite, Databox, and a whole lot more. And I'm very excited about this conversation. We've been trying to get it going for almost a year now. And the really cool part about this conversation is that on LinkedIn, a lot of people will start taking Eddie's name and making it synonymous with copywriting advice. He's grown his email list to over 50,000 subscribers. And in a very counterintuitive way than what we hear a lot of in the content marketing space, his focus is really a lot more on compact micro articles and the best information you can get in the least amount of words possible. And I think that's absolutely brilliant because it is so counterintuitive and it goes against the narrative, but also incredibly effective. Eddie can say in 400 words what a lot of people can't say in 4,000. So I think that's really, really cool. I don't want to take too much time. Before we get into the interview, I do want to say we do have a sponsor now, which is Content Harmony. They are a brief writing tool that saves me at least 2 hours of brief and has consolidates at least 4 of my different tools. Stay tuned because before we get into the edit later on, you'll see a demonstration of that. It'll be real quick, and then we'll keep it going. All right. Without any further ado, Eddie, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you very much, Tommy. I appreciate that introduction. That was very kind. Thank you.
I try. So I don't like to do a whole lot of preamble aside from that. So the first question that I have for you is tell me about your content marketing philosophy and how has it evolved over time?
My content marketing philosophy. Well, you kind of nailed it. I try to keep things as concise as possible, short as possible. So I have I have a word count that I'm usually trying to stay within when I write my articles. I also so I have that word count, but there's also like 3 elements, I guess, or 3 pillars to every article that I write. There's like the narrative, or the story, the anecdote, and then there's the lesson. So the copywriting or creativity principle or technique, because that's what I write about, copywriting and creativity. And then I have that word count. And so like the puzzle that I'm solving for is always like, how do I connect this story, this narrative with this lesson in this many words? And so when I put those 3 things together, usually one of my articles comes out. So that's what I try to stick to. That's the methodology or the philosophy that I try to follow. Is how can I stay within those 3 pillars?
Now, how did you land on that? Because it is very counterintuitive to the rest of the content marketing space and the advice. A lot of the advice is like bigger is better, longer words, because that's going to get you the search rankings. And from what I've seen, a lot of your content, you really are performing well. You're doing a lot more over social media, and you have a lot of engagement on your LinkedIn in particular to drive traffic to those pieces. Can you tell me a little bit about how you landed in that sort of zone, especially where it's kind of counter to what we know?
Sure. I mean, Very Good Copy started as a way to kind of teach myself copywriting and marketing. I was an English major. I studied literature in college. So when I graduated, I didn't know anything about copywriting. I didn't know anything about advertising or marketing. That just wasn't my discipline. I thought I was going to write books for a living, but breaking into being an author is pretty hard. So I got a job in sales for a year after college, and then I was still kind of like looking around for writing jobs, and I landed on this opportunity at Career Builder. It's like a job board site, and my job there was to create job descriptions or job ads. So, busy managers would have, from big companies, Google, what have you, would have a ton of job ads that they needed to run. And they would give them to me to kind of optimize them, rewrite them, and make them engaging and compel people to click. And really, that was my worth. It was like my worth was based on how many times I can get people to click on that ad. So I realized eventually that I was doing direct response copywriting. And I kind of went down that rabbit hole and became really consumed with it and obsessed with it. And so these articles were really just like a way for me to teach myself those techniques and those principles. I was like, if I can put this technique or this principle into a clear and concise and engaging article for myself, then I'm probably ready to use it in my promotions. And so that's how it all started. I started creating these articles solely for my benefit. So there was no SEO involved. There was no there weren't any of the tropes that you would typically see in content writing, because it was all for me. And then eventually, when I put them online, they gained traction kind of organically. And so that's how it all started. It wasn't a really until a couple of years ago, I didn't start in earnest promoting it or marketing it. It was just kind of this thing that I did to teach myself. And so maybe that's why I never really led with SEO or never really led with any of the traditional best practices.
Now, what was that initial response to that? Because, it was growing organically. And I know that my response when I first discovered the stuff that you're putting out there is that I thought you were just being very respectful of my time, right? You're giving me everything I need without, insulting my intelligence, right? You know your audience pretty well, I would say. Where it seems like you approach it with like this idea that the person on the other side already has some base of knowledge. What was that response like in the very beginning?
Well, it was positive, I think. It was, I don't even know if I was consciously trying to do that at first, be respectful of people's times or I was just trying to do what what I saw a lot of other copywriters do was to try to be as concise as possible. So when I was studying like direct response masters, Gary Halbert, John Carlton, Gary Bencivenga, they were teaching me a lot of things, but one of the salient points was, hey, you have to be clear and concise. And so that's what I was trying to do at all times, is just kind of like follow those two things. It's like, is this sentence clear? Does it make sense immediately upon reading it? Is it concise? Am I using one word? Am I using 3 words where one will do? If so, let me cut those words out. So I was just kind of like following those rules, I guess. And then eventually, I heard that feedback a lot, and I heard people saying like, yeah, this is copywriting for busy professionals, or this is a blog that really respects your time and gives you what you need immediately. So I kind of like leaned into it and started putting the word counts on there and everything. But it was all very it was all very gradual and organic, I think, Tommy. It wasn't like from the get-go. That was kind of like my MO.
For sure. Okay, so tell me a little bit more about the because you've done direct response. You've kind of got this like range of things that you're doing, right? You've got the direct response side, the copywriting side, the blogging side, the social media side. And they're all these different aspects of the same idea, right? You do this really great job of telling a story to get your point across. What's the question here? The question here, I suppose, is what's your idea, or what are your thoughts on the persuasion element of that to get somebody to take action, to go from one place to another, to do the thing you want them to do? I don't know if that question makes sense, but
no, I think it does. I mean, you always need to incentivize people, So like, I think you're referring to my news, like when I get people from my newsletter to my LinkedIn.
Yeah.
The most successful newsletter sends, and just for anybody that doesn't know, I have a newsletter, and in the newsletter I post an article, and I also post that exact same article on LinkedIn. and then I transfer the audience from my newsletter to LinkedIn to kind of stir up the algorithm and, get everybody who engages and likes that post to share it with their network. And then it brings people to that post, and then it gets them to my website, and then they get into the newsletter. And so it's kind of this virtuous cycle, this growth loop. And the most successful newsletter transfers are always the ones where I'm incentivizing folks. There's always a modicum of goodwill where people, if they read a good article, I'll say, hey, if you want to support me, you can go and leave a comment or engage with this somehow on LinkedIn. And a percentage of people will always do that because they appreciate the work and they appreciate what they learned in that newsletter. But the most successful ones are where I'm like, hey, if you leave a comment, one comment will win XYZ. They'll win a course that I'm giving away, or one comment will win, a 30-minute conversation with me where I'll edit something of yours. In so many words, it's like, how can I incentivize people? How do I know my audience as well as possible so that I can put something in front of them that incentivizes them to go and do what I'm asking them to do? Because as much as goodwill does help and does work, we're all busy, right? Like we all need a reason to do something, and I think that's one of the salient points or rules, I guess, that every marketer and copywriter must follow. It's like, what's in it for me? People are always asking, what's in it for me? So answer that question and do it clearly and concisely.
Can you give me an idea of what some of those incentives might be? Because you did say, course, but what are some of the other ideas? And speaking of which, I do want to just give you a quick plug right now for the course that you just launched. And I might want to talk about that just a little bit more in a bit too.
Well, that course is actually, as a matter of fact, today I sent out a newsletter and I said, hey, 2 people, if you comment on this post, 2 people are going to win my course. The comment with no likes and the comment with the most likes, or 1 comment with no likes and the comment with the most likes.
Brilliant.
And in a couple hours, it's been there's like 150 comments and it's growing steadily. So I think that's been a pretty good one. Give them something inherently valuable. Like a piece of information, piece of content that not everybody is privy to. So something exclusive.
Right on. Okay, so we're going to move into the next section of the show, which is tell me about your process for coming up with ideas and then your editorial process afterwards. So take me from the journey of ideation all the way to publication.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, ideation really starts with recording ideas, I think, for me. I have made it a draconian habit of mine to, whenever I have a connection, and the connection is basically what we were talking about at the top of the show, is like when I have a story or an anecdote, something that I saw in a show or something that I read in a book or something that I heard from, someone else, a friend. That's where I get a lot of material, actually. It's just like, stories that I hear other people say. So whenever I come into a story and I can connect that story because I have a modicum of knowledge when it comes to copywriting and creativity and marketing, if I hear something that reminds me of a lesson or a principle or a technique, and I make that connection and it seems flush to me, then I write it down. So I'll just make sure that I write down that idea, that connection in a running list that I call the well, because
Physical
I could just
or
always.
digital?
It's digital. I just pull out my phone and I do
All
it.
right. Perfect.
Because I don't always, because that's the thing, you don't always have a pen and paper, but like, it doesn't matter where I'm at, I always have my phone. So, I'll just pull out my phone and I'll write it down, and then I'll have it there. And I think that's probably the most important part, Tommy, for real. Like, it doesn't seem important, but like, there's nothing worse than looking at a blank page and not knowing what you're going to write. So it's like, it's really important for me to have a repository of ideas, of connections, of notes that I could just scroll through. And usually it's like, I write it down, and if I feel excited about it in the moment, like if I feel emotional about it in the moment. But then if I'm scrolling through, with the benefit of some time, there's some ideas that kind of fade on me, and I'm like, I'm not really into that anymore. But there are some ideas that are still as exciting to me and as emotional to me. And so that's kind of how I know that, hey, maybe I should write this. It's like, I remember when I was a kid, my mom told me that we were shopping, and I was like, I don't know if I want this hat or whatever it was I was having. And she was like, look, just leave it. And if you leave the store and tomorrow or the next day you find yourself thinking about it, then it's probably a pretty good indicator that you like it and that you'll wear it, and that's something that's that you should buy. And that's how I think about ideas as well. Now, in hindsight, it's like if an idea is kind of like lingering and it's back there and it won't go away, then I know that that's probably something that I should write about.
What's your hit rate what's your ratio from burnt ideas to ideas that actually make it?
Low. Low. Very low, man. Quality comes from quantity, basically. Whether you're right, whether it's on paper and you've written it, or it's just an idea that's sitting in the well, quality comes from quantity. So maybe 1 in 20 ideas or something will make it into an article.
That's
maybe 1 in 15, 1 in 20, something like that. Because the ideas are easy to have. Ideas are really, really easy to have, especially after you kind of like train yourself to, I don't know, your craft, your discipline.
Yep.
And then it's like you just kind of like train that muscle to recognize when a story kind of like overlaps or like can fit flush with something in your discipline. So those ideas are relatively easy for me to have. In fact, it's like now I have to like kind of like pare down how much I take down those ideas, because like my wife is like, she's getting kind of tired of me pausing documentaries and pausing like shows. She's like, I'm trying to watch this, so I have to be respectful of that. But yeah, so now I'm trying to kind of like pare it down. But I really think that is one of the most important things that I do and that I've trained myself to do is be really draconian about recording my ideas and keeping them there.
I think discipline I think discipline about any of this stuff is a recurring theme from a lot of the people that we've had on the show. All right, here's a question I've never asked before, because we have talked about ideas and capturing ideas, and the primacy of good ideas is that's a phrase that Ryan Law came up with when he was on the show, and I thought that was brilliant. What makes a good idea?
Oh my gosh, what makes a good idea?
Yeah.
Well, I guess that's your definition of an idea. Like for me, an idea is that combination of story and takeaway, story and lesson. And if I have a good enough story, and if there's a clear enough connection to that lesson, then I think that makes a good idea, at least from my perspective. Because really, the story is the most important part. Like the lessons, like copywriting, like marketing, lessons are everywhere, and we're all kind of saying the same things in a way. There isn't anything new in the copywriting space or in the marketing space. I mean, there's new technology, there's new mediums, but the psychology behind copywriting and marketing is constant, and that's because our psychology is constant. We have the same psychology today as we had 1,000 years ago, and probably will have into the future 1,000 years. It's just like our brains evolve very, very slowly in that sense. So there's nothing really new going on in the copywriting world, let's say, or in the creativity world. But there are new ways to express those concepts and those techniques and those principles. And so the story is the most important part. If you can engage somebody with a story, make somebody feel something with a story, that's how you write good articles. That's how I write my articles. That's how you write good ads. That's how you sell things. Is just show people a moment and transport them into that moment, make them feel that moment, and connect that feeling to a product or something that you're selling. And that's how you sell things. So I guess to answer that very difficult question, by the way, Tommy, I think that's what a good idea is to be. It's like it's is it a good story in the first place, and does it connect well to this lesson?
I'm going to ask you one more question that's kind of the flip side of that, or related to that, is how do you keep your mind open to see good ideas? Because I think there's certainly a training to that. I know when I was at Shopify, one of the things that I would do is just observe myself as I was going through any sort of online checkout experience, as I was going through any of the buying experiences. How do you recognize an idea that you should at least try and capture?
For me, it's like I was saying before, it's kind of like that emotion that like it's do I feel something, like, am I excited? Is it exciting for me? It's kind of like that Robert Frost saying, what does he say? Like, no tears in the writer, no tears in the reader kind of thing. It's like, if it's exciting for me, if it's emotional for me, then that's probably going to trigger a similar feeling or emotion in someone else, because we're all the same. So that's how I think that's how I think about it, is like, am I excited by this?
Mm-hmm.
And if I am, like, probably, you got to trust yourself at some point. Like, whenever you're doing anything creative, writing, art, what have you, you got to trust yourself to a degree, and just kind of like trust your intuition, because we've all been doing this for a long time, and you got to like kind of trust your experience. And that's kind of the plight of like new creatives, is they have to kind of like get through that period of learning what they like and what moves them, and trusting themselves.
It's that Ira Glass quote where it's if you there's this gap between your taste, you have killer taste, but doing the actual work, there's a gap between those two things, and the only way to get through that is to do a lot of work. And I think what's great about what you're saying is basically it's about kind of staying in tune with your stuff and what is, or like what your interests are, and being observant of the world around you, and sort of taking that as the inspiration. And where did I want to go with that? I wanted to say something to the extent of just, it's the training of yourself and sort of staying open to those experiences, and really being aware. All right,
that's exactly right, Tom. That's exactly right.
Yeah, let's move on to the next question, which is, tell me about your pregame. So you've recognized a good idea, you're excited by it, you're not on the hamster wheel of trying to just generate for the sake of generating, which is something that I think is great about what you're saying. Tell me about your pregame before you sit down to edit.
Well, you got to write it, I guess, before you edit it.
Yeah.
So I just try to write it as fast as I can. I mean, the articles are generally pretty short, and it's kind of like I've written so many of them now that they kind of come out in that word count, which is like 300, 400 words. So I just kind of try to write it down as fast as I can. Really, sometimes I write them in 15 minutes. Sometimes I write them in a little bit, in half an hour, whatever. But the real work is editing, obviously. So after I have, because it's you can't edit a blank page, so you have to. I have to have a starting. You know what I mean? So I write it down, and then and then I sit down and I try to really I think about like, hey, what's the one thing I want to impart to people here? Like, I don't want the article to do too much. I want it to just say one thing really, really well. And I think that's comforting for me, and I think it's comforting for the reader as well, to know that, hey, there's just one thing to focus on here, one takeaway, one learning. And so that's what I try to edit for. I try to say, hey, what am I really trying to say here? What's the salient point that I'm making? And then I try to kind of trim off all of the fat or anything that's not that. And then So that's kind of like the macro edit, what am I trying to say? And then I guess like the micro edits, are, around clarity and concision. Am I using, $5 words here when I could be using 10-cent words? Am I using too many words when I could be using fewer words? Does this sentence make sense, upon first read? Does this sentence, is it easy to read? So like little things like that after that big picture macro edit takes place. That probably takes, I don't know if it takes the longest, but it takes a while, because it's like you could play around with that stuff forever. You can play around with it until you're dead. So I just put a time limit on it. I just say, hey, I'm going to give myself this many hours, or I got to push this live by this date, and whatever I have by that date, I push live basically. Because you could tinker forever.
How many hours?
It depends it depends when I sit down to start writing it. But like, let's say, probably total, I'm working a day or two on each article, and it doesn't necessarily have to be at my desk. It's another thing, and this is just a personal thing for me, but I do a lot of work on the couch,
Yep.
at night. I'm just, after I'm done watching whatever I was watching, I just kind of feel like I don't feel like watching TV anymore or whatever. So I'll just pull out my phone and I'll just edit on my phone. And actually, it helps when I transition from like my computer to my phone, because it's just like, it's a different view, it's a different screen. I don't know why, but it just helps me see it a different way.
No, I think that's cool. Like Erin Balsa was on the show months and months ago now, and she said that when she edits, most of the time she's editing on her phone because that's where most people are consuming the content. And I thought that was kind of this, like, it sounds like you're kind of arriving at that intuitively, but like I think that's a brilliant approach to it, because I know for me, I'm like, I'm not reading 3,000 words on this right now. I've got no time. So the idea of editing on your phone is, I think, something that needs to be popularized a little bit more, because it's just not talked about enough.
Yeah. But that is exactly the incisive kind of thing that Erin would say. She's fantastic. So
Yeah.
I will go back and watch that one.
Yeah. No, it was a great episode too. One of the things she was talking about is like, and this is very much in line with what you do, right? She said, CEOs don't read listicles. Right? They just don't. And I think that's really neat, is like what you're coming out with are these really good ideas that are respectful of time. I think because you speak more to a senior level marketer themselves, right? And it's a little bit more advanced, and it's respectful of the time, and I appreciate that as a fanboy. I really appreciate the work that you do, especially in that area. I want to jump into the edit here in just a few minutes. Is there anything else you'd like to say about your process before we move on to the next segment of the show?
Probably not. I think we'll probably just cover it as we're going through this.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
All right, so we're gonna skip. I would like to everybody watching right now to check out this Content Harmony, fantastic tool for writing briefs, and I'll show you why right now. While we wait for the edit, I wanted to introduce you to one of my new favorite tools. It's called Content Harmony, and here's why it's my new favorite. First, I hate writing content briefs just because of how much time it takes. If you want to get the information you need, you have to bounce between so many different tools. You've got the keyword data from one tool. You need to use Google to see who you're going up against. You need to know what their domain authority is. You have to.
How's it go? General, Tom.
What's the keyword density? What are the search trends, and so much more. And let's be honest, we don't do it all because it takes.
I feel fine. I feel good.
Now that's where Content Harmony comes in.
I feel all right. Yeah.
All you have to do is upload a key phrase.
I mean, as long as you think it's going well, it's going well.
The search intent of each key phrase, the average word count across all the top ranking results, how optimized the average piece is, the average links to each piece, and the average domain authority across all the competitors.
So
And when
Tommy,
you click into a key
I'll be
phrase,
honest
you
with
get
you.
even more detailed
This
information.
article, I'm
such
wondering if I could
as
just like
the
read
search
the.
intent of each key phrase, the age range of the ranking results, the SERP features, and the keyword seasonality and trends. You can also do a topic analysis and see the keyword density that you should be targeting, the outline of each article that ranks in the SERP, questions people are actually asking with information from Google, Quora, Reddit, and more, and the common external links that people are citing, your top internal link targets, high authority resources, and recent news to keep your results fresh. Also, you can get way more detailed information on each of your SERP competitors. You can see what images are ranking and what videos are also going out there. And here's the cool part. All you have to do is click any of these elements and it will automatically populate a brief, which you can then share with anyone. And finally, once you get the first draft back, you can run it through their content grader and see just how well optimized the article is. Seriously, I just started using it and it's saving me at least 2 hours a brief and has consolidated 4 of my most commonly used tools. Now, if you want to try it out for yourself, you can run 10 reports for $10. Also, you can help support the channel and get 2 months of free bonus credits when you purchase the full plan through my link. All right, now let's jump back into the edit. Yep. All right. Welcome back. Actually, Eddie, can you move your your screen over just a little bit to the left? I think that'll work. Yep, a little bit more.
Like this?
Little bit more.
Like this?
There we go. Perfect. Actually, just a tiny bit more. No, we're good.
Oh.
We're good. Don't do anything more. Perfect. Okay. Cool. And I do want to encourage anybody who's following along here to go ahead and check out the article. We'll get that into the chat in just a moment here. So Eddie, the first question that I have for you is, what was your first impression of this piece?
So should we read it or not? What do you think? No? Got it. Well, my first impression, and look, I know that somebody wrote this from your audience, so I want to be conscientious of that. I'm not. My first impression was that it's not how I would write it necessarily. I thought that it was well written grammatically. I thought it was sound, and from that standpoint, but I don't know if I agree with the premise necessarily, and also it was kind of like meandering and winding. So like it started as an article about AI, but then turned into an article about distribution. And so, that kind of touches on the point I was talking about earlier, is like, what's the focus here? What are we trying to kind of get across? So if this was written in the, I guess in the same vein as like, something from VGC, from Very Good Copy, it would, that's one critique that I would have on it, is that it doesn't really have like a clear focus and takeaway, I guess. Also, I guess there was a lot of telling, and it's an old trope, and I kind of beat it to death, but I'm always trying to show the reader something. I'm always trying to put the reader in a situation, in a moment. I'm trying to zoom in on a specific circumstance or instance, and this article didn't do that. There was no moment that it was zooming in on. There was no place that it was kind of taking the reader or transporting the reader. It was a lot of telling, as far as like AI, where we're at, and what we can expect. So I guess that was my first impression, Tommy.
Okay. So that's actually a really good question for you is like, if you find in your own pieces when you're going to do the edit that you're starting to meander, how are you catching that in yourself, and how are you rectifying that when you go to finish up? Because we all meander, right?
Well, I guess you don't meander if you start with if you start knowing what your focus is. If you start knowing what that moment is per se. So a lot of my articles have a moment that I'm kind of zooming in on, a moment that I am really trying to impart to the reader and really trying to transport the reader into, kind of like a slice of life, like a glimpse into there. And so that kind of keeps me on track. Is if I know that I want to put the reader in a situation, it becomes hard to deviate from that, because
Right.
I'm writing about it. I'm in it. And then the challenge, the objective becomes, okay, well, how do I take this moment and connect it to this lesson, basically. So here, this article is, it would be really hard to edit it, because it doesn't start from that place. It doesn't abide by those kind of fundamentals. And
Yep.
so, yeah, I think it serves a different purpose, and it's well done for that purpose. But it's not how I would necessarily tackle this topic of AI yeah.
Well, you did recently tackle the topic of AI,
I
and
did.
it was in a micro sense, very digestible sense. So, can you walk us through that?
Yeah, it just so happens that today, an incredible kind of coincidence, I did release an article about AI.
Oh,
And so I
can you
guess
zoom your screen out just a little bit now? Sorry.
zoom it out.
Yeah,
How about like this?
there we go. Now
Like
move it over to the, yep, there we go, to the left just a little bit.
to the
Further up.
left,
Scroll up.
like that,
Yep, scroll up just a little bit more.
like this.
Other way. Other up.
Other up. Is this
Go.
okay?
Let's go down. Let's go down a little bit.
Like
See,
that?
thank you for a little bit more.
Like that.
Little bit more. There we
Like
go.
that.
Perfect. Thank you,
Okay.
everybody, for this is a brand new experience that we're doing here. So thank you for being patient with us as we work out the bugs on the technical side. All right, perfect. Let's keep going.
Cool. So, so literally today, this morning, I posted this about AI, which is interesting, because that article was about AI as well. But I've been getting a lot of questions about AI every single day. People ask me. I feel like every single day people are asking me what's my take on AI. So this was kind of the article that I wrote to answer that question. So I guess I can read it and then maybe make some points about why I did what I did here.
Yeah,
Would that work,
please.
Tommy?
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
So it's called "You Against the Writing Machines." I asked one of the big AI writing engines a question. Can you describe meeting your firstborn child? The AI thought for a moment, then it produced 88 words. Meeting my firstborn child was a truly magical experience. It was a moment of joy and excitement that I will never forget. When I held my newborn for the first time, I felt a wave of love and warmth that I had not experienced before. I was filled with so much joy and pride that I was now a parent. My little one looked so peaceful and content in my arms. Seeing my baby for the first time was an unforgettable moment that I will cherish forever. I read it. Then I wrote my own description, limiting myself to the same 88 word count. He's so quiet, I said, looking up at the nurse. She smiled behind her mask. We all wore masks, gowns too, gloves and hairnets too. Is that okay? I said. Is it okay he's not crying? I thought healthy newborns cried. It's okay, said the nurse. He's quiet but alert, she said. Just look at him looking at you. I looked. He's looking right at you. He was. He was looking in my eyes. He's saying hello, she smiled. Hello, I said. I felt like crying. Hello, son.
I want to point something out. If you go back to
Yeah.
the past slide there, this is what I'm talking about when you're talking about respecting, or when I was talking about respecting your audience and respecting your reader, is these are all feelings that I think we can all relate to as parents, right? The idea of being scared that something is wrong, the idea of the uncertainty, the idea of the felt like crying at the end. And when it comes to respecting the reader, these are all things that you already know they're coming into the piece with, whereas the robot version says something that anybody could say, right? It's the show don't tell situation, and you're showing here what that situation is like. And in those 88 words, you're bringing me through a journey that I totally understand as somebody who's been in that position before. So I just wanted to point that out because it's the huge difference, and it's a perfect illustration of the thing I was talking about earlier with you respecting that there's an experience there that somebody's already working off of.
I think that's what I was trying to impart, is that, like, when I was talking earlier about show don't tell, that's really, really important. Like, it you can't stress it enough. And it's so played out, right? We're always saying show don't tell, but it really is the only way to bring people into that moment and zoom in on a moment. And I think that's whether you're writing an article like this or whether you're creating an ad, that's a really important thing to do, is zoom in on that moment and bring the reader into it with you. Also, dialogue is a really, as long as we're talking about brevity, this whole show is about brevity. Dialogue is such a useful tool because it says so much more than what telling words say on their face. The dialogue is how we communicate with one another, and there's so much inside dialogue, so it's kind of like 1 + 1 = 3, or sometimes 1 + 1 = 100. One word can mean so much when you say it versus one word when you just write it and tell it. So I think, compared to something like this, which is just straight telling, no dialogue, no moment necessarily, just kind of like the experience. On its face, it's not bad writing necessarily. Like, everything is there, grammatically everything is there, the sentence structure is there. Like, it's even, the AI is even doing what I've asked it to do, kind of like to describe that experience. But it's uniquely different from something like this, which is so much shorter. The moment is so much smaller. It's just like, I remember when this was happening, it took 3 seconds for this to happen.
Yeah.
It really encapsulated everything about that experience for me, which was just like connecting with my son for the first time and saying hello to him for the first time. And it was so small, but it was so important to me, it was so special to me. And that's the difference between AI and the human condition, and so this is kind of like the story part that we were talking about in the beginning. This is the narrative, and then that's my son, by the way. He's the man. But then this is the lesson, right? That's the other piece of that we're trying to connect. So I wrote, AI can be a remarkable productivity tool. For example, I use AI as an instrument, an aid for sourcing and organizing ideas. AI can give writers and copywriters the dots to help us start writing, which often is the hardest part. But it cannot connect the dots like we can. It can't be personal like us, human like us. It can't feel the gravity of a profound moment like a birth, much less the essence of another person. These are uniquely human things. And so AI cannot write like us. It can't tell stories like us. It can't, because the specifics, the details, the granularities we collect through our lived experiences belong to us. The human condition, its nuances and imperceptibles, its vastness belongs to us. So will AI replace But yeah.
Oh, before you carry on, there was a LinkedIn post that you put out. Oh, it was a while ago now, probably close to a year and a half, where it was about those little moments. The world, our experience is made up of these little micro moments, and that's essentially what you're saying, right? AI can't have those little moments, but you can, and you can demonstrate those, and you can talk about those, and people can experience those, and it's those minor details that I think you do a really great job of bringing out in your copy.
AI can't have a firstborn, you know.
Right.
AI cannot have a baby, and so everything that it produces is really just kind of this, I don't know. It's like this amalgamation, you know, and it doesn't come from a singular perspective, and that's so important, you know, like
Yeah.
everything is so much more compelling when it comes from a singular perspective, a singular point of view, you know. One of my favorite examples is Peanuts by Charles Schulz, the cartoon. You know, like every character on Peanuts is really just a part of Charles Schulz's personality.
Yep.
You know, Charlie Brown is the wishy-washy part. You know, Linus is a different part. You know, Snoopy is a different part. The dreamer, perhaps. Like every character is really just a part of him, and it all came from his brain. It all came from his point of view and worldview, but it connected with the entire world. Billions of people love Peanuts, and it all came from one person. And so there's something so like powerful about writing about one moment from your perspective versus an AI or a machine writing about one moment from a billion people's perspective, or everything that it's kind of gathered from the internet. And that's what's happening. And I think that's the salient difference, is that, you know, you're not as an individual, as a single person with a unique point of view, you're not an amalgamation of everybody else. It's just coming from you. And so yeah, these little moments, these happenings, even though they're coming from a singular perspective, they appeal to everybody, because again, we're all so similar. We're all the same. We're all kind of moved by the same things. So yeah. So the original question was like, the question I'm always getting is kind of like, you know, am I at risk? Is my job at risk? Am I going to be replaced by AIs? So that's kind of like where I was going with this. Will AI replace writers? No, it will not. AI may eventually replace some writing, but it cannot replace writers, people, everything we know and feel and emote. We are, as it were, too much to bear. And I truly believe that. I really do think we're too much to bear. Yeah, so that's kind of that idea of taking these two things, this story, this narrative, and connecting it to this point, this larger point that you're trying to make, or this lesson that you're trying to impart. And so that's what I was trying to do here. Yeah.
I love it. And you, like I said, you've said in, you know, how many words was this? 400 and slightly over 400?
I don't remember. 393.
Yeah, so slightly under 400. You've said in less than 400 words what a lot of people have been trying to say in, you know, 2,000, 3,000 word blog posts. And it's like, the answer is no. Like, we already know this, you know, and you're respecting that intelligence and like really bringing that forward in that copy, and it's brilliant. How long did you take to edit this?
I know I wrote it really, really fast.
Mm-hmm.
I know I wrote it in a moment of like excitement, because I was like, you know, I think because I've been getting the question a lot, and I was trying to like nail down how to articulate it, and I just thought this was a good idea. Like it hit me, and I was excited about it. So that's how I knew that I should write about it, because it was just kind of like exciting. So I know I wrote it pretty fast. I probably wrote it in like, you know, whatever it was, 20 minutes or half an hour after I got the original prompt from the AI, and then it probably took me a couple days of like sitting down with it, editing it for half an hour, then walking away doing something else. That's another big thing, Tommy, is like just the incubation period alone. Your brain is doing so much thinking in the background while you're off, with your family or having a run, or having a, in the shower or whatever. When your brain is away from the work, your brain is still actively connecting dots behind the scenes, and that's how light bulb moments happen. That's how like you get like these epiphanies, is that these ideas, these connections bubble up because your mind is subconsciously always kind of working in the background. And that's what I did. I would like sit down for half an hour, edit, and then walk away and let my brain kind of do the rest, and then come back, edit some more. So it wasn't like a continuous 5-6 hours of editing. I almost never do that.
Yeah, I've found that some of my best, I write the thing in my head before I ever put pen to paper, right? And you do the editing in your head before it ever goes out. If you want to take your screen down, we'll...
Oh, yep. Like that.
Go. Yeah. So I think that's wonderful. If you wanted to sum up a lot of sort of what you're saying here and really package it in a way that, I mean, brevity, right? If you were to give the brief version of everything that you're talking about, what would that look like to you?
The brief version of everything?
Yeah.
Well, I think you could do it in a number of points, right? You could say show, don't tell. You could say zoom in on a moment. You could say use dialogue when you can to express yourself. And I guess another thing that I didn't really mention was a technique called realism, in which you don't really allow the reader to know what the characters are thinking. You only show the reader what the characters are doing and saying. And so it's called realism because that's how people actually communicate in real life. Like you and I are sitting here right now. I don't know what you're actually thinking. There's no way for me to know what's going on inside your head. I can only infer based on what you're doing and what you're saying. And so I think when you use that technique, what it does is it creates kind of holes in the narrative. It creates like a void, and consciously or otherwise, people want to fill it in. They want to fill in that void with their own worldview and their own experiences. And what that does is it brings them more readily into the story. So even if I'm talking about my kid or my wife or my family or my experience, if I'm using it, if I'm doing so with realism, literary realism, people aren't seeing me and they're not seeing my family. They're seeing their own experiences, their own family, themselves. So that's another point, is like if you can, if you can do that, then you are kind of like showing and not telling. You are zooming in on a moment. You are probably using dialogue, because it's kind of like in the definition. You have to, you only show people what people are doing, what the characters are doing, or what they're saying. And if you're showing them what they're saying, you're using dialogue. So maybe to answer your question, a good summation would be use realism in your writing, and you'll kind of cover all of those points.
I'm a big fan of Robert McKee and the book Story, and it was one of the most influential pieces, or one of the most influential texts that has ever been part of my writing. And one of my favorite quotes from that, I'm paraphrasing, but it's, if the characters are saying what they're saying, you're in trouble. And I think that's one of those things where that's kind of what you're getting at, right? It's the dialogue is there to serve as a window, not into your soul, but into the reader's soul in a way, because they can recognize themselves in that dialogue. Cool. Well, I think that's it. We're right about time. I really appreciate your time today, man. It's been very enlightening, and I hope we get to do this again sometime soon. Hopefully it doesn't take another year.
Hopefully not. Yeah, I've enjoyed myself thoroughly, and I really appreciate you having me on, and I appreciate how you went about conducting this and everything that goes on in the background. I know it's not easy to do a live show, and all the technology and all of the timing and everything that has to go into it. So I commend you for doing and doing it so well. Appreciate it.
Doing our best, trying to make it a good experience. So I do want to say to anybody who's watching on the website right now, if you want to see more of the cutting room, go ahead and check out the sign up via email below. We do have writing prompts. We have bonuses that are exclusive to email subscribers, and a whole lot more going on. So again, Eddie, thank you so much for coming on, and have a great rest of the day.